search competition's good. It cannot come at the expense of browser competition.
Hello and welcome to Outside the Fox, where we explore what's happening online and why it matters. My name's AJ Patel.
And I'm Kim Horcher. Today we are discussing a pretty complex topic, and it's not that easy to break down, but we are going to try it today. The U.S. Department of Justice has accused Google of monopolizing the search market. One proposed solution is to force Google to sell Chrome and maybe Android. Another is to ban Google from paying browsers to feature its search engine. This has huge implications, and it could change how we browse the web.
Here to chat with us today is a very special guest, Laura Chambers, Mozilla CEO, who's going to help unpack all of this. Thanks for joining us, Laura.
I'm so delighted to be with you on the podcast and to be talking about this really important topic.
All right, let's back it up just a little bit. Can we talk a little bit about the background of this antitrust case and where we are now?
So the US government won a case against Google for using its power to dominate the search market. That's already happened. Now we're in what's called the remedies phase. So they're figuring out, well, how do we resolve that? How do we fix it? That's what's currently being considered, and we're expecting a judgment on it late summer. Now, of course, improving search competition sounds great on the surface. At Mozilla, we really fiercely advocate for competition. So that sounds good. But what's important is you need to go a little click deeper, because if you look at the remedies on the table, particularly this proposed remedy of stopping search payments, it could actually have a significant negative impact on competition in browsers and in browsers' engines, right? So by trying to fix a problem with search competition, you could actually have a very significant negative impact on the ability of independent browsers like Firefox to do well. And in fact, what you could do is you could give even more power to tech giants like Microsoft. So the bottom line here is that, yes, search competition must improve. We completely agree with that, but not at the heavy expense of browser competition. And there is a better path forward than the remedies that are currently on the table. There are interventions that can improve search competition without obliterating browser competition. And the Department of Justice really needs to do this. They have to prioritize user choice, privacy, and real alternatives, not just create this shift of power from one big tech company to another. And so we care so much about this because the decisions of this case that are happening over this summer will shape the internet for years. If we don't protect independent browsers and independent browser engines, we risk giving even more control to the biggest players and losing what makes the web open and fair and accessible in the first place.
That is a lot of information. Could you help break down the difference between a search engine, a browser, and a browser engine?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I think we don't talk about the different sections so much, and we do take some of the work for granted. So let's start with the search engine, right? So a search engine basically helps you find information on the internet. You enter a query and you get a list of relevant websites, right? That's how a search engine works. And then a browser is the way that we access the whole internet, including search engines, by the way. So you go to your browser, that's where you can review web pages, you can run web apps, you can check your email, you can engage in social media, you work, right? So the browser is the way that we interact with the internet. And that is what's on the surface, right? That's what we interact with on a daily basis in our work and home lives. What we don't see and what we don't talk about very much is what sits underneath the browser, and that's the browser engine. The browser engine is an incredibly complicated piece of software. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money to maintain, and effectively it is the brain inside the browser. It takes the code, right? So websites are effectively just sets of code. It takes that code and it translates it into something that you can see and interact with. It basically renders that code into something that you see and access through the browser. And it's so important. The browsers are the gateway to the internet. Browser engines determine a lot of the security of what's going on, a lot of the speed of how browsers interact. So it's really fundamental to the way, to the fabric really of the internet.
You mentioned it takes a lot of time and money. Could you kind of give a little bit more information on how that gets implemented?
Yeah, so with a browser engine, as I mentioned, it's a super complicated piece of code, right? And it's constantly evolving. There's always new websites, there's always new web standards, there's always new expectations of speed and interoperability. So we have a huge team of engineers that spend every day and every night working on the browser engine, thinking about new web standards, thinking about how to implement them really well. And there is a reason that there's only three left, right? We only have Firefox's Gecko, we have Chromium from Google, and we have WebKit from Apple. At the peak of the browser engine wars, there were actually five. Microsoft had their own browser engine. Also, Opera did. But both of those companies realized that that time and the cost and the work it takes to maintain an independent browser engine was so significant, they ended up moving to Google, to Chromium, right? And so we are the only one left that is a independent browser engine. We are not connected to our own operating system or devices. We are just purely about creating a fantastic browser engine and browser for you. And we're the only one that's run by a nonprofit, right? Our mission is about creating an internet that is open and accessible and private and safe for users. And so we're the last standing engine, and it's incredibly important for the internet to keep that independent voice strong and having a seat at the table for the development of the future of the internet.
So in regards to this case that we're discussing today, why does that play a factor?
Yeah, so what you need is you need competition across all those layers, right? You want competition in search. That's actually what this case is about, because search shows how you find internet information on the internet. That's important. You also need competition on browsers. If you only have a choice of one browser, then that browser is influencing how you access the internet, right? A lot of power can accrue there without choices. And then on the browser engine side, it's critically important that you have choice there too. If Gecko didn't exist, Firefox's Gecko, there would only be two browser engines left, Apple and Google, and that effectively form a duopoly, and they both are guided by corporate interests. Mozilla is a nonprofit, right? Our mission is about making the web open and accessible. So when we have a browser engine, when we are at the table representing what's important for the development of web standards, when we're representing underrepresented voices, right? Like the accessibility community, privacy communities, non-Western markets, small developers. We have a seat at the table because we have this browser engine of creating web standards. And that has a huge impact on making sure that the web stays open and accessible.
It sounds like there's a lot at stake, potentially the open internet. How might the ruling of this case affect Firefox specifically?
Yeah, so as I said, the way that we don't make money through operating systems or through devices at Firefox or at Mozilla. What we do is we have our browser and we are funded through search engine payments, right? And so the proposal that's on the table for this remedy would be to remove search engine payments. That means that we would lose a significant amount of our funding. If we don't have our funding, it's hard to keep our own browser going, right? To keep that competition in the browser market. And it would be incredibly hard for us to maintain that huge investment that it requires to keep our browser engine going as well. So the implications of this case are pretty significant. If you lose another independent browser, if you lose the only remaining independent browser engine, that means there is not this mission-oriented voice at the table that's creating alternatives for users and ensuring that the web standards are developed in a way that creates this open and accessible web.
This is a big deal. The stakes are very high. What happens if there are only two browser engines remaining?
Yeah, let's think about that world. We've taken it for granted that Mozilla's had the seat at the table and we've been influencing web standards. But let's think about a hypothetical world where the only two browser engines were Apple and Google, these two big tech for-profit companies. The first thing that would happen, I think, is a real loss of the needs of real people, right? So when we're at the table, we're thinking about small developers, we're thinking about independent companies, we're thinking about alternative markets, and we're representing those voices. And so as we think about standards and things that the web should represent and do, we represent those voices. That voice would be lost. The second thing that can happen is a stagnation of innovation, right? For example, if neither Google nor Apple wanted to really support a new privacy enhancing technology or a feature that doesn't align with their corporate goals or their product goals, it's not going to happen, right? We wouldn't be at the table really pushing for that path forward and saying, look, we've got to improve the way that web handles privacy. It's critically important. The technologies exist. Let's integrate them as a standard. That push wouldn't happen. The other thing that would happen is that developers are going to lose choice, right? They'll be back to this binary. Do I develop for Chromium and for Google or for WebKit and Apple? And we could very quickly go back to that world where you go to a website and they're like, well, this website only works in Chrome or it only works in Safari, which then would really limit the ability of other browsers to be successful and create a lot of lock-in. And then finally, and I think this one is really important to note, is that there would be a lot less accountability and ability for local impact. If there are less independent options, that means it's going to be harder for governments, for nonprofits, or for local groups to audit technology, right? To suggest changes or to build specific web tools that could reflect their values or specific local needs. So a whole bunch of things could be fundamentally changed in a world in lower competition for browser engines.
So thank you so much for the information on how it affects Firefox and how it may affect the users directly. What would be your ideal outcome of this case?
Yeah, so the remedies need to level the playing field, not tilt it more to big tech by undercutting the competitors in the space like Mozilla and like Firefox. Here are some guiding principles for any remedy that is mandated by the court. Here's what we're hoping that they stand up to. Number one, improve search competition, but do it without harming browser competition. Number two, do not sacrifice user privacy. And number three, facilitate genuine competition. Avoid simply shifting power from one big tech to another. So the court's decisions in this case are going to really shape the future of browser and search competition for years to come. And it's critically important that people are aware of it, that they're aware of the risks of getting it wrong, and that they strongly advocate for a better outcome for a free and open and accessible web.
Laura, do you have some final takeaways that you hope people remember especially?
Yeah, if I could drill one thing into the brains of everyone, including the folks working on the remedies here, is that search competition's good. It cannot come at the expense of browser competition, right? That will create too many implications on the future of the web. And the future of the web is so foundational to how we live, how we interact, how we work. And so the costs and risks are too high.
And do you have any actionable next steps for regular users?
Number one, download Firefox, right? Support independence. The more power that you can put behind independence anywhere, whether it's your independent shop, your independent browser, it is good for the world. So download Firefox. We've got a bunch of great new features we just launched. I know you'll love it. And then secondly, stay informed about this case. Hopefully this was helpful. We have a blog on our Mozilla blog post as well that talks it through, but raise awareness, right? If you are active on social media, post about it, talk about some of the risks and costs. I think we take the free and open internet for granted because it's been there for a while. It is fundamentally at risk as a result of this court case. And so the more that you can raise awareness, tell your friends about it, try and help influence a great outcome here. It's going to benefit us for generations to come.
Laura, thank you so much for joining us today and breaking it all down. This is a very complex issue and it's very far-reaching for anyone who uses the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. This is important. It's complicated, but it's one of those topics that it's important to spend the time to get to know because the implications are really significant.
Subscribe to the channel and be sure to download Firefox because it's the best. We'll see you next time.